Hello, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
This is our podcast about sailing the East Coast of the United States. In some episodes, we'll focus on passages and destinations. In other episodes, we'll talk about boats, equipment, and techniques. And when we come across an interesting person, we'll try to get them as a guest on the show. But before we dive into this episode, we need to say a special thank you to our supporters. Several listeners are supporting the podcast via Patreon. If you'd like to join them, you can go to patreon.com/sailing the East.
Hey, Bela, good to see you. And again, to the listeners, thanks for your support. Bela, fill me in. Who's our guest today? I'm really anxious.
Yeah, so today's guest is Mike Malekoff. So Mike's been a guest on the show numerous times. The most recent one was episodes 86 and 87. And Mike started a very first episode he was on. His sailing adventure was a dream. He was talking about, he was a sailor, had a sailboat on Lake Champlain, which is borders New York State and Vermont. And he had a boat up there, nice boat. And he was thinking of going down to the Bahamas. And so the first episode he was on was sort of just talking about that whole adventure and getting ready to do it. And then through numerous other episodes, we sort of followed him down the East Coast, all the way down to Florida, and then over to the Bahamas. And then the most recent episode was getting back from the Bahamas to where he is now in Georgia. So it's been a nice long sort of travel log that we've done with Mike. And this is sort of another episode along that way of once they got back, it was like, okay, now what?
Yeah, I mean, I think our longtime listeners will totally remember Mike. And, I know he's been a great guest. And yeah, this is the part of sailing trips that I've never even thought of before. So I'm excited to hear what he's up to now. So I think let's just get right to the interview with Mike Malekoff.
Hi, Mike. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Bela. How are you? It's been some time since we spoke.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I looked it up. You've been on the podcast quite a bit. I think it started on episodes 72 and 73, and then 77 and 78, 81 and 82, and 87 and 86. And now this will probably be episode 104 or something like that. And this whole thing started with your journey and planning from sailing from Lake Champlain, which is in New England between New York and Vermont. So it's a lake, not the ocean, down a canal, down the Hudson River, down the East Coast of the United States, over to the Bahamas for the first time ever, and then back. And you guys are now back. And so I wanted to talk about some of that experience. The other episodes of the podcast cover all of those things in detail, but I think the last episode we talked about, hey, we made it over to the Bahamas and we made it back to the East Coast of the United States. And so pick it up from there.
Sure. And I have to say that before we left Lake Champlain, it was 3 years in the planning because we at the time did not have a boat. And we were just talking about this idea during COVID about, our vacation home. And our vacation home turned into a boat. And when we said it was going to be a boat, we had to find a boat and plan the whole thing. So it was 2 to 3 years in the planning before we left Lake Champlain. And you sort of summed it up, the whole trip down the coast. And we kept in touch and we were doing episodes and telling you about all the good and evil things that take place when you're living on a boat. And we eventually finished our trip at the end of May of 2023. And basically it ended because our insurance said, you must end it because of hurricane season down south. And a lot of your insurance companies require you to be north of Florida. At least ours was north of Florida by June 1st. And there are many different locations that you have to be north of. Some go up into the Carolinas, South Carolina, North Carolina. But our insurance and many others say that the Florida line is the point that you have to be north of. And fortunately, we had picked a perfect location to come back to, which was in Brunswick, Georgia, which is one of the southernmost points in Georgia before you cross into Florida. And it's known as a hurricane hole, which also met the requirements of our insurance company, that it was a designated hurricane hole. And it's Brunswick Landing Marina, which is where we ended up. And it's a huge marina that is very popular with the cruising community. So that was where we ended up. And interestingly enough, to go to the Bahamas, you have to get a permit, and the permit lasts for so long. It usually runs in like 3 and 6 month increments. So as I said, our permit was getting ready to expire, and we also needed to be back before June 1st. And as anybody that cruises can appreciate, when you're in the Bahamas, you don't say on Monday, oh, by the way, we need to head back, and you head back on Tuesday, and you're in Florida on Wednesday. It's something, that takes planning. You have to look at the weather, the currents, the tides, and you have to be prepared that if it doesn't meet your satisfaction, you have to wait it out. So we literally started to plan to leave in, I'd say, second to third week of May, because we knew once we got to Florida that it was then a 3 to 4 day trip up the coast of Florida to get to Brunswick, Georgia. My point is, we actually got back about the 23rd of May into Georgia, and we had great weather, so we didn't have any delays, and we got back to the marina. And our plan at that point was we were having the boat taken out of the water to go on land, because the boat now has been in the water for well over a year. And as anybody with a boat knows, you've got to take care of the stuff on the bottom every now and then. So our plan was to get it out of the water. Plus, for hurricane season, we didn't want to leave it in the water. My point is, we got back and we had no problems. We got in. We had a slip all the way at the end of the marina where the yard is, where they take your boat out. And it went well, but our boat wasn't coming out immediately because we had to unload everything from the boat that we've been living on the boat for over a year. So, we were planning on having it out like a week later. Lo and behold, the day, I think it was May 31st, I went over to the office to check something, and it was pure chaos at the office. And I'm wondering what's going on. Well, literally, there were 30 boats waiting to come into the marina because everybody cut it right to the last day before the insurance thing. And literally there were boats waiting a mile out from the harbor, and they were telling boats, don't even think of coming in until we tell you. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was so glad that we came in a week earlier, because everybody had the same idea that we're going to beat it by one day. So that was sort of the end of our trip, and now we had to take the boat out of the water, and as I said, unload the boat literally before you take it out of the water, because once it's out, it's now 10 feet up in the air, and it makes taking stuff off the boat a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, I know that feeling of walking up and down that ladder, lugging stuff off the boat because you didn't get everything off before they pulled it out. And it's not a lot of fun, and it's a whole heck of a lot of extra work as opposed to just stepping onto the dock, throwing it into a cart, and dragging it up to your car.
That's it. And so the interesting thing that I reached out to you is, I figured we were done with our podcast stories and everything, and we planned this thing for 2 or 3 years. We were on the boat for well over a year, went to the Bahamas, and we're back. And it's sort of like you spent all this time planning. And when you're on the boat, as you know, you're constantly planning with weather and what are you doing? Well, we got back, the boat comes out of the water, and it's sort of like, what now? We hadn't thought of anything beyond that than, coming into this marina and having the boat taken out of the water. And then the questions start. Well, okay, where do you want to be in our dry dock? You have options. You can be here, you can be there. Do you want electricity? Do you want to be tethered down? Which is something that I have to say, I don't think you see up in New England because you don't have hurricanes hitting. But down here, they actually had an option that we were on a concrete pad. And it was an upgrade to be on a concrete pad that the jack stands now hold significantly better than being on stone or dirt. And the pad actually had metal hooks in it. And they literally take those straps and hook it to your boat, that in addition to the jack stands, you're now strapped to the ground, which, as you can appreciate in boating, is an upgrade. And then the other is, we don't have to winterize a boat because the boating season sort of ends come June until November 1st, when you're allowed to go back south again. So the boating season really quiets down quite a bit. And unlike the north, where you have to winterize your boat because you have to get the water off, you don't have to do that down south, but you do need electricity. And I was like, well, do you want electric? And I said, well, why would I need electric? And they said, well, you're going to have a dehumidifier in the boat, because instead of battling 10-degree weather, it's now 95 and 95% humidity, and you don't want your boat getting mold in it. Yeah. So we had to set up a whole system to have a dehumidifier that could empty out of one of the seacocks all during the summer, and it worked well. But electricity is extra.
Yeah, everything's extra.
Everything is extra. So now you're facing that, and I hadn't even considered. They asked, when do you want to go back in the water? Well, I don't know. We just got here, and they said, well, you'll have to let us know because we're booked almost a year in advance. And I'm like thinking about this, and I'm saying, oh my gosh, I didn't plan on getting the boat back in the water. So a whole nother factor came in, and now I had to figure it out. One thing I did learn, we were thinking of getting the boat back in the water, taking it out June, putting it back in September, because we actually were moving south to be closer to the boat and not making the trek from Vermont. And I soon learned that there are no slips until November 1st, because everybody has booked a slip for hurricane season. So that soon became apparent that our boat isn't going back in September. And the first date was the middle of November that we could get a slip. So, all of this sort of fell on us, coming back, that we hadn't even planned for or thought about putting the boat back in the water and where are we going to go. And what also was a big factor is, okay, now the boat's out of the water. What are you going to do with it? And all the things that crop up during your trip, you can only fix so much, as anybody realizes. And you let, I have to say, a lot of things go just because, one, you can't get to it because it's underneath the boat, but two, just the availability of stuff when you're in the Bahamas is non-existent. And naturally, we weren't letting safety issues go. These were just, little things like, what you would do in your house when you have a drip coming out of a faucet and you're not going to get to it today, or I need to repaint this. So all of those things now are coming up that had to get done because you want to get it all done before the boat goes in the water. So it was like the trip that never ended.
So let me ask you a question. When you went through the process of deciding where you were going to go, and you decided on Brunswick, Georgia, and the requirement was north of Florida for you. So you could have been, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, up into Virginia, even up into the Chesapeake. And why did you choose Brunswick, Georgia?
For a couple of reasons. Probably the biggest reason was being older. We still have parents that are alive that, in this case, my wife's father lived in Macon, Georgia, and he's on his own, and she wanted to be closer to him. So we were actually looking in the Savannah, which is up in North Georgia, all the way down to the southern coast of Georgia. And ironically, how we ended up in Brunswick is a couple we met in the Bahamas were telling us how wonderful it is to live in Southeast Georgia, and the fact that we had been at the Brunswick Marina coming down, and it's just a huge cruiser marina where a lot of people live on their boats. The marina is over a mile long, just to give you an idea of the number of boats that are there. And this couple that we met invited us to visit them and show us around the area. And the next thing we know is that's the place we chose. And we had a house built, and we just moved in a couple of months ago on top of dealing with the boat. So it was primarily to be closer to my wife's father, but it also works out that we're very close to Florida. So if we decide to go back to the Bahamas, we've eliminated 2 months of travel on the boat,
right.
From Vermont. So you know, it's a great place where the boat is very close to where we are. We're actually in St. Mary's, which is the southernmost town in Georgia that we're located. So 20 minutes from here is where the boat is located. And, you know, so that sort of sums up how we picked this location.
Nice. So is the boat back in the water now? Because it's, as we record this on December 1st.
The boat is not in the water. Which also comes to scheduling things with a boatyard, that they're usually short-staffed, and everybody has a crisis to deal with the boat before it goes in the water. And you know, when you don't have a large staff, everything gets booked up. And we wanted to take care of, we wanted the bottom repainted. We also had to change the zincs on the boat, which I don't know if you want to get into what the zincs do. And then we also we wanted to redo the stuffing box. So it's very easy to, you know, pull the prop and everything off to do that while it's out of the water. And not scheduling it quick enough, the boatyard said, well, we're not going to be able to do that by the November 10th or whatever. So we got delayed, and we've been moving into a new home. So we're juggling a half a dozen balls right now. So we're just waiting now. They're going to let us know when they can do the stuffing box. And and also one of the transponders is not working correctly. The transponder in the front of the boat that has the wheel on it that gives you the speed, and I think we had talked about this in a previous episode, that started giving us problems, and somehow that's also connected into giving you correct information with the apparent wind, and
that's right.
And so it's sort of mucking up the whole system, and the transponder at the top of the mast has also been acting up. So those are two things. The thing at the top of the mast you can do while you're in the water, but the thing on the bottom, I prefer working on it when the boat's out of the water, because I've taken it out when it's in the water, and you have to be very quick with the plug, because as soon as you take it out, obviously the water starts shooting into the boat.
Yeah, and it's a pretty big diameter hole. I mean, it's like 1.5 inches, 2 inches in diameter. So it's a big hole that transducer goes into, and water does come in pretty quick.
Yeah, and it was something where it was working fine most of the trip, and it just started to crap out like the last 3 weeks. And that's one of those things where, you know, it wasn't a factor in safety at all, because obviously you still have your GPS positioning and stuff that gives you your speed. But we just decided it wasn't something we could fix because the cost of shipping it from the States and the duty that you pay increases the price like threefold for an item like that.
Sure.
So that was just, we'll fix it when we get back.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because my little paddle wheel, I have the same type of system, little paddle wheel, that when the water goes by it, it rotates the paddle wheel and it has a magnet in it or something, which then sends a signal to
Correct.
my chart plotter, tells me how fast I'm going in the water. And mine just gets gunked up with marine growth. So what I typically do with mine is I don't use it. I pull it out and I don't use it. Like if I'm going on a trip someplace and I say, okay, I'm going to be doing a lot of sailing. I want to know relative wind and true wind and how fast I'm going in the water versus how fast I'm going over ground, et cetera, because it helps you with the currents and things. Then I'll put it in and I'll use it for, several days. But then when I get back to the marina, I'll pull it out. And mine has a little flap on it. So the sleeve that the transducer inserts into, the bottom of that has a little flap on it. So when you pull the transducer out, that flap it's not a watertight seal, but it's enough to slow the water down a little bit before you put the plug in it. I mean, water still comes in, but it's not, it's not a geyser. So,
gee, I don't think I have that. And we've talked about this. We have almost identical boats.
Yeah.
I don't think I have a flap or anything. The water starts shooting in and I shove the plug in real quick. So, that's basically it. But I'm going to try and do this. That's one of the things that I have to get there and replace before the boat goes in the water. We're hoping to get it in the next 2 weeks, at most, because I have a slip now and I'm also on land. And naturally, as you can appreciate, the marina isn't giving me a break on either. So I'm chalking up a bigger bill because I have 2 spots that I'm taking up right now.
Yeah.
So,
it always amazes me at our marina. Our marina, I think, has 350 slips, and there's probably maybe 100 or 120 or 30 boats that they haul. The other boats are smaller and they go out on trailers, or the other boats winter someplace else. And so when I fill out my contract, they ask me for a week. Give us the week you want to go in the water and give us the week you want to come out of the water. And with my insurance, I got to come out by November 1st and I can go back in May 1st, which is fine. That's a good season for us up here in the north. And it always amazes me. Somehow the marina always gets my boat out of the water in time and always puts me in the water on time. And, like now my boat's up on the Hard, of course, it's on land. It's in this huge parking lot. And it's like a Tetris puzzle because it's surrounded by other boats. And somehow, they figure it all out because they've never disappointed me in being able to get my boat in and out on time. And
well, how many years have you been doing it at that marina?
So I've been there. This was my 4th year. Yeah.
Yes. So you're sort of in a rhythm that they know your boat, they know you.
Yeah.
And it works out. For us, this was the very first time we've been to this marina. And now we're finding out. Oh, and the other thing too, when you're on the Hard, as I said, is we had our boat strapped down. Now they had a hurricane, what was it, a month or 2 ago, that came through Florida, but it came through on the sort of the west side and then came and shot up, and it actually passed through our area. But at that point, it had been downgraded, considerably. So, but it was still 50, 60 mile an hour winds at the time. So naturally I'm nervous and I want to check everything on the boat, which I did, to make sure the straps were down. The yard was very good. They went around to all the boats that were strapped down, to make sure everything was tight. Oh, and the other is when we came back, the other thing, because it is hot in Georgia during the summer, I actually covered the boat. So I got the sort of the canvas covering that lets light through. It's a mesh. And, it took me several hours, but I went to Harbor Freight, bought, these big mesh things, and, certainly made a huge difference in keeping the sun from beating down, and also the dirt and the birds that, end up going on your boat. But anyway, ours held up fine, but we later, because the marina has a Facebook thing, it turned out a couple of boats on the hard. And this is another lesson. When we came in, I took the sails off the boat. Sorry about that. I took the sails off the boat because I want to have them checked and cleaned and everything. Well, the marina and the yard learned a hard lesson that one of the boats that was in the yard but was not strapped down in a different area, they still had their sails on the boat, and with the high winds, the head sail came undone. So I don't think I have to tell you what happens when your boat, a sail comes out on a boat and you're on the land. Well, now all of a sudden the tension on your boat is tremendous because basically, the pressure on a sail when you're sailing. Well, it blew the boat over.
Sure.
And when it blew the boat over, as you were saying before, you're packed in there. And guess what? It hit the boat next to it, which knocked that boat down, which then knocked the next boat down until it got to the end of the row of five boats came over on the side.
Oh, gosh.
And, and it was just so very quickly after a memo went out that everybody on the hard had to have their sails removed from the boats. And to me, it was like a no-brainer. Why would you leave your sails up? Because I think everybody's experienced that situation where for whatever reason, that head sail, somehow gets loose because of a chafed line or whatever. Now, you and I don't have to worry about our mainsail because it's in the mast. But even still, we take ours out because, if a critter gets in there, or a squirrel or whatever, and they store the nuts in there and chew through something. So I still take the sails off the boat, or I pack them away in the boat.
Yeah.
But so they had to bring in a giant crane to lift these boats up, and you can imagine the insurance cost of that. So I was just glad we were in the area where our boat was strapped down, but none of the boats around us had their sails still on the boat.
Yeah, even up by us, they won't haul your boat if you have your head sail on, your jib is on.
Mm-hmm.
So they won't even haul it. So you have to pull it off. And
yeah.
So let me ask you a question. So your boat, to remind listeners, is a Hunter 44 deck salon.
Correct.
And mine's a Hunter 45 deck salon, basically the same boat. And we both have in-mast furling sails.
Correct.
And do you have vertical battens in your mainsail?
No, I do not. And the key thing is I actually know what they are because there's so much in owning a boat, learning all the parts and everything and all the configurations. No, we don't have the vertical. Do you?
I do. And does your sail have any battens in it then? And it probably doesn't have any battens, right?
No,
Okay.
we don't have any.
Yeah.
Do you find that makes a huge difference for you?
I don't know, because I don't know what it would be like without them. So the reason I was asking, because I have yet to take my mainsail off. And I was thinking about, I just roll it up and leave it in the mast for the winter. I've never had any trouble with that. And I've been thinking about taking it off because I got a couple of stitches that should be fixed. And then I'm thinking, how do I get the battens? I mean, there's I think 3 or 4 vertical battens. And the batten that's closest to the boom, to the mast, I mean, that's like a 50-foot long batten. I don't
Where-
even know how I pull it out of there.
And does it come out at the top of the
No,
sail?
at the bottom. It comes out the bottom.
Oh, so you, oh, but yeah, how do you pull if it's that long? It's got to be flexible enough.
Yeah, but it's got to, I mean, it's got to bend. I mean, the boom is not that high off of the cabin top,
Right.
right? So it's got to, I haven't tried it yet. I mean, it must come out, right? Clearly it comes out.
Yeah. Yeah. It must. It must be flexible enough for it to bend so that you can get it around and off of the boat.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't have that. And interesting, I was going to ask you because offline we've talked about the mainsail, and you know, with a furling mainsail, you run into the thing of it jamming from time to time. And you know, I'm still sort of wrestling with that part of it could be after a while a sail, you know, stretches and stuff, and you know, the shape changes where it makes it more difficult. But there is a technique, as you know, with getting that sail furled in correctly. You can't have it too loose, you can't have it too tight, because it can jam on you. And I've had it do that several times and been able to juggle it as you do, pull a little in, pull a little out, and eventually you get it so it'll work. But one of the things I had heard in the mast, and I don't know the technical name for it, but inside the mast, the bar that runs up and down the mast that the sail furls around, that every now and then you should tighten that. And I've never done that. And I'm just curious if you fooled with that to tighten it, that there's an adjustment screw at the bottom that you can reach into the mast itself to loosen the thing. And apparently there's a way to spin it, because that thing runs the length of your mast, which is, you know, whatever, 40 some feet, 50 feet. And, you know, it can be loose, which is also could cause it to jam. Have you ever tightened that?
So I have not made the adjustment that would increase the tension pulling on that rod that the sail wraps around. I have checked the screws that tighten all that stuff to make sure they're not loose. So I've done that, but I have not messed with the tension. And you know, the other interesting thing is, into furling up the main, those battens, they're bulky, and particularly when I get to, you know, I have the sail, you know, 2/3 of the way rolled up or halfway rolled up, and then there's like 2 more battens that have to roll. Boy, it gets tight when each one of those kind of goes through the slot, because it adds a significant amount of bulk to the sail. And I've actually, the reason I asked you if you had them or not, because I've toyed with the idea of taking them out. Because, you know, I'm not a performance sailor. I'm not worried about, you know, a quarter knot here or there. But if it would make the rolling up the mainsail easier, just because I don't have those big, I mean, they're probably a 1/4 inch thick each, maybe even 3/8. So, and there's 4 of them, and the drum everything rolls around is not that big in diameter. So you know, they're adding significant bulk to it.
Well, I can tell you this, you don't need them, because I don't have them, and it works just fine. And I can't imagine having them because of how tight it is inside the mast. It just, to me, it's just like, oh my gosh, another thing to create the sail from jamming in there. Yeah,
there's a guy at our marina who has I forget, it's a Hunter 38 or 39 or something, I don't know, and he races that boat. So but it has in-mast furling on it, and he bought some high-tech sails, you know, kind of racing sails, which are significantly thinner than the heavier canvas. They're not canvas, Dacron sails that we have. And he says once he put this new sail on, he goes, it rolls up like it's just super easy because it's a much thinner material you're trying to wrap around this drum into a confined space. So he said
Right.
that has
So
made a big difference.
But you know what the downside is to that.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, they're really expensive.
That's number one. And what's the second thing? They don't last as long
Right.
because they're racing sails. They're lighter, which means they tend to deteriorate quicker. And before we went over, we were in one of these high-end marinas down in Fort Lauderdale, and lo and behold, next to us was a full-scale racing sailboat, and owned by some guy, and it was easily $1.5 million. And they were getting ready to go somewhere to race. And you're always asking and talking to them and the guys, the crew and stuff. And it was like, what kind of sail configurations do you guys have? Well, we have 19 sails.
Yeah.
And they were the latest and greatest. And I had to ask, I said, well, what are these things? Well, probably we have $100,000 to $200,000 worth of sails on our boat.
Yeah.
And I'm figuring this out and I'm going, that's almost what our boat costs.
Yeah.
But when money is no object, as you know, and there are people out there where money is no object with boats. It's the whole thing with sails and configurations and getting into the furling mast is a whole nother animal. But going back to the beginning, no, we take our sails down. Hey, they're expensive. Why would I want to leave it on the boat and stuff? And as I said, I also get them checked, with the seams and stitching, because the last thing you want is to lose a sail. And as I look in my boat, I don't have 5 or 6 backup sails.
Right. Exactly.
I have 3 sails on my boat, and that's it. So
yeah, well, that's you have one more than I do.
Oh yes, well I have a Jenniker.
Yeah, I do not.
That for mine. So
what are your plans for this coming season?
My plan is right now is I'm going down this long, exhaustive list of things that need to get done on the boat, because everything from as I said, the stuffing box, we have some of the issues with at the top of the mast, but I want to get the rigging checked, which is beyond my capabilities as to what to look for and stuff. I mean, I have an idea, but I want to get the rigging checked. There are a bunch of things with polishing the boat my list is long and exhausted and exhaustive. Really, we haven't made plans yet. And I know everybody's asking us, are you coming to the Bahamas? Are you going here? Are you going there? We literally, left Vermont over whatever it is now, 2 years ago. And I think I might have mentioned, we were only planning to rent our home in Vermont because we're at a resort ski area. So, everybody is looking for a place. And as it turned out, it was during, the pandemic. And, finding a place in Vermont near a ski resort was impossible. So we got an offer we couldn't refuse. And we were planning on getting at least a second home down south. So between all of that and moving and some other personal things with family, we don't have any yet. I'm still working on getting the boat in the water.
Yeah.
So I'm behind. But the good thing is we're 2 months past leaving Vermont and getting to where we are, because it took us, we left late September, and by the time we got to Brunswick, it was Christmas week. So, now part of that was we stopped and we visited and we took our time. We didn't sail. We didn't leave New York Harbor, go out on the ocean, and 4 days later, we were down in Florida. We went down the ICW, we went up the Chesapeake, we had, it was a vacation, if you want to call
Sure.
it that, but
Yeah, yeah.
we were, taking our time and learning as we go, because as much as we had learned in school and getting certified and stuff, it's still different when you're by yourself and you're navigating these things of what I call learning the hard way in some cases. And I think I told you things that they don't teach you in school, where we thought we had a leak when we were in Charleston, and all this noise of the hissing noise from the bottom of the boat, thinking there was some leak and the water wasn't coming in. And it took us a full day before we figured out it's the shrimp on the bottom of the boat scratching the hull.
Right.
They didn't teach me that in sailing school. So all of those things, it took us a while, but we're positioned where, if we left today, we could be in the Bahamas in basically a day by going the northern route. So we don't have plans yet. We're just going to get the boat in the water, and then I think, get it back out there and refresh ourselves. And as I said, checking everything. But we do have a lot of friend requests because everybody, as you know, takes their vacation. If you're up north, you go to Florida for a week or two. And everybody has asked if on their way to Florida, could they stop?
Yeah.
So we'll see. So yeah, the long-winded thing is I don't know yet what we're going to do. I just want to get the boat back in the water, and it'll be nice because the weather here is fantastic. It's 75 degrees today on December 1st, and basically it's perfect weather for sailing now. And the boats are just pouring south now from up north, because now's the time to head over to the Bahamas. Some people go early, and some people wait, because the winter season, when I say winter, it's still 75 degrees, but the weather can be a bit challenging with winds right now. But there are a lot of people that do this all the time that are heading over there now.
Yeah, well, that's great. Hey, well, this was a really good sort of wrap up to your trip, and sort of things that most people don't think about or talk about, which is okay.
Well,
now, what are we going to do? Where are we going to keep the boat, et cetera. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast.
Yeah, no, I wanted to follow up because it doesn't end when you put your boat on land. It still continues. And as friends of ours who talked us into moving here, they were getting ready to leave to go to the Keys, is that the money pit still keeps taking up our resources and getting it ready and getting it out of the water. And I think that's my point, is that if you have this idea like we did of a sailing trip, that do be prepared. I underestimated to a certain extent. I knew, and I heard the stories of, your boat is just a money pit and all of that. It is, but I mean, not in a bad way, but you definitely need to make those plans that if you sit there and think, oh, once I get the boat in the water, or once it comes out of the water, there's no more costs. Oh, no, it still consumes you. As I said, you have to pay the monthly fee, the electricity that's required, and then any maintenance that you need, painting the bottom of the boat. Now, I know a lot of people do it themselves. That's not up my alley to sand the bottom of the boat. I think you've done it yourself at times, and being there in the Tyvek suit from head to toe for hours at a time, that just, I just didn't want to do that. And, and if you're not going to do it, it's going to cost you, I can easily say it's several $1,000s. Just the paint alone is $300 a gallon. Everything with marine is expensive. So my thing is, we had a great experience. What our next chapter is, I'll let you know when I call you and say, guess what? I have another podcast I'm ready to do. Because it's just, and I know we're wrapping things up. I want to say to you, I love your podcast. When I found it, when we were looking to start sailing and stuff, it was like everything was down south. And all of a sudden, here's a podcast for New England people. It was like, oh, that's really cool. I have to check this out. And then I find out you've got the same boat as I do.
Yeah.
And yeah, so your podcast, we love it, or I love it anyway. And it's been so much fun chatting to you and letting you and your other listeners know what it's like to take up this adventure. And if people are thinking about it, it's something that we'll remember for as long as we live. But just prepare yourself, because it is a lot of work. So and maintaining a boat is a lot of money and work, depending on the size of your boat. So anyway, Bela, it's been great, and I'll let you know when we're planning something. And as I said, if you ever want to come south, and now that your boat's up on the Hard, ours will be in the water shortly, and you're always welcome to come visit us.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you for the gracious comments about the podcast and the offer to come for a visit. And I look forward to receiving that email or the phone call from you as your next chapter in your sailing journey sort of reveals itself. So I look forward to that.
Well, good. It'll only be coastal, because we're not crossing any oceans. I can tell you that. We listened to the thing of the family that crossed over to Europe.
Yes.
And what they've dealt with, and the English Channel thing was just incredible. But we're coastal people, so that would be the extent. But we will let you know. So
that's super. Thanks again for being on the podcast again, Mike. Take care.
Oh, you're welcome, and have a great holiday season, Bela. We'll keep in touch.
Thank you. Same to you.
Wow, Bela, I mean, what an interesting story. The timing and the constraints of Mike's return to the U.S. were fascinating to me. And I guess kind of thinking through and distilling this down, I think that once you choose your destination, I can think of, 3 or 4 key steps in the process to plan this back end of a sailing trip. And I think that we can distill that out of the story. Let's give it a try. What do you think? What are the key steps that we pulled from this interview?
Yeah. So I think here's a couple of things that rattled around in my brain. So one is there's timing constraints, and sometimes these timing constraints are driven by insurance. So, we have a hurricane season here on the East Coast of the United States. So depending upon your insurance carrier, they may or may not have constraints on where your boat can be at certain times of the year. And you can imagine that a lot of people may have those same types of constraints, and they're trying to stay on their boat as long as they can. But then they have to have their boat north of a certain spot. Like Mike was talking about, he had to have his boat out of Florida. And there's a lot of boats in Florida. So, there's a lot of other people who probably have that same date. And so kind of planning that through and not waiting till the last minute is an important issue there. So I think that was one of the things. And Mike talked about that, like, oh my gosh, there's a big line for getting your boat pulled out. And at the other end, everybody wants to go back into the water, because everyone has the same date where their boat can be back in the water, or they can be down south of a particular sector. Some insurance companies are, you can't be in Florida. Other ones, you have to be up at least to the ones I'm aware of are out of Florida is one. Another one is you have to be up into the Chesapeake Bay or north of the Chesapeake Bay during the prime hurricane season, which runs from, I think it's June 1st to November 1st. I may not have that exactly right, but that's sort of the nominal time frame on that. I think the other piece is you got to identify a marina that, if you have this constraint, and if you want to get hauled out, which marina are you going to do it at? And do they have the capacity to lift your boat? Do they have the storage facility to put your boat up on land? And remember the time frame. If you have to be out of the water by June 1st, you can't show up at the marina the last day of May, because there's probably a line for them pulling people out of the marina. And I'll tell you, the marina I'm at, they have 2 travel lifts. That's that mechanism that sort of picks the boat up and out of the water and deposits at some place in a big parking lot. They have 2 of those. And, you know, in a given day, they can pull maybe 10 boats because it takes a long time. They got to bring the boat over to the place where the travel lift is. They got to put the straps on it. They got to lift it up. They got to drive it to where they're going to park it. They got to put jack stands under it, you know, so they can do maybe 10 a day. So, you know, you got to take that into consideration as well. I think the third thing is, in addition to them being able to pull your boat out, you got to think about what services the marina has. So are you in a place where you need your boat winterized? So is that something you're going to do, or is that something they're going to do? Right down in Georgia, it's probably not going to freeze. So Mike, I think he talked about this. He doesn't have to winterize his boat. But what he didn't think about was it's humid down there, even in the winter. And the boat's closed up. It can get musty and moldy. So you sort of need a dehumidifier. Okay. So if now you need a dehumidifier on your boat, that means you have to have electricity or access to electricity. So, you know, you got to think all that stuff through. And particularly if this is the first time you're doing it, right? You may not sort of think about all this stuff. And that's where forums are really good. There's various different, you know, blogs and forums and sailor forums and YouTube channels that talk about this stuff. Some places will tie your boat down. So they'll actually sort of fasten it to the ground with these straps. And maybe your insurance policy requires that. Maybe they don't, but you got to think that through. Some marinas, when they pull your boat out, they're going to want to take the mast down, particularly if it's prone to getting a hurricane. They want all the masts down off the boat because it's sort of less windage for the wind to knock a boat over. So you sort of need to think about all that stuff. And in Mike's case, okay, I've been living on the boat for the last 12 months. Now where am I going to live? And Mike had this additional complication of moving from Vermont, where their house was. They sold their house and they bought a new house down in Georgia. And so he's moving as well. So he's got living on the boat, not living on the boat, moving a household. So there was a lot of moving parts there, but somehow he kept it all together.
Yeah, this was an amazing, amazing story to me. And again, this was part of sailing that I never even thought of. You know, you figure that all the trip goes into the planning part of it. And what do you do when you get done? Mind-boggling. So hopefully the listeners found this interesting as well. But I mean, thanks to you for kind of talking through it, and thanks for kind of breaking it down into these kind of 3 or 4 steps. And thanks to Mike for sharing the story. Any last comments from your side, Bela?
No, I don't have anything else to add. I think we should wrap this one up, Mike.
All right, great. Well, listeners, thanks for joining us for yet another episode. And we hope you found the conversations interesting and thought-provoking as we did. As always, if you have questions about what we've discussed, please get in touch with us. Those of you that are longtime listeners know the email address. It's sailingtheeast, all one word, @gmail.com.
And if you enjoyed that podcast, hit the follow button on your favorite podcasting application. And if you would like to be a guest on the show, or maybe you have an interesting story or an interesting sailing history, or you're planning a big trip, let us know. Reach out to us at the email address, and maybe we can get you on an episode. Hope to see you all soon out there. And signing off from upstate New York this cold winter day. See you all soon.
And Bela, I hope you stay warm, and hope the sun comes out soon up there in New York. From over here in Münster, Germany, as we say, auf Wiedersehen.